Well, so the next speaker is Christoph Poley. Christoph studied applied computer science at Chemnitz University of Technology. He is a software and data engineer at the German National Library, where he is responsible for the Department of Automatic Indexing online publications. Christoph will present machine-based subject cataloging at the German National Library. Christoph, feel free to start when you're ready.
Yeah, so thank you for the kind introduction. As you can see, the title of my presentation today afternoon, I think, is Insight into the Machine-Based Subject Cataloging at the Germany National Library. As a main part of my presentation, I want to speak about workflows now. We have some of them, and I picked out 4 interesting of them to give you a first insight of what we do concerning machine-based subject cataloging. And afterwards, I would like to speak about 2 more themes. First, about resources, and then we've got enough time about the DNB AI project. But first, I want to start with a brief introduction to my library and that's what we do. Yes, our library is the central archival library in Germany and was founded in 1913 in Leipzig. And now we have 2 locations, one in Frankfurt and one in Leipzig as well. The legitimation of our work is the law regarding the German National Library, or the German word Deutsche Nationalbibliotheksgesetz, shortened with DNBG. So we collect everything that is published in Germany with 2 hard copies, and very interesting, as online publications when it's available. So I want to speak a little bit about the current situation. We have got an increasing number of online publications, and you can find on the graph a very sad smiley. And this is the reason for us why we do automatic subject cataloging, because every day we get approximately 7,500 new online publications that find a way to our library without a uniform and controlled subject cataloging content. Obviously, we can't handle it with intellectual subject cataloging, so we filled the gap with machine-based solutions, which became an essential part of our library strategy. And the current productive solution is the Erschließungsmaschine, and the release was in spring 2022. So I come to the use cases of that, what we do. Essentially, we assign 3 different types of subject cataloging for online publication. The first one is the integrated authority file, or the gemeinsame Normdatei GND, and there we assign the subject headings. The second one are the dual decimal classification subject categories, and finally the DDC short numbers that allow us a more detailed view into the DDC subject categories. Summarized, the first column is an extreme large classification problem with more than 1 million of different descriptors. The second and third columns are classification problems with 100 respectively 1,000 of different classes. So I come to the heart of our Erschließungsmaschine, and surprise, surprise, this is ANIF, a very welcome open source toolbox that's being developed at the Finnish National Library around the team of Osmo Suominen. ANIF uses different tools for natural language processing and machine learning as backends, like fast text, Omikochi backends, the Maui-like lexical method by Osma, the Standard Thesaurus Wirtschaft Finite State Automate, and much more. ANIF also includes analyzer, configuration, vocabulary, and fusion modules as well. Furthermore, and this is very welcome too, that ANIF uses standard interfaces and formats like a web interface, Python bindings, the usage of scores for vocabulary, a Docker container version, and much more. And last but not least, and this is a very important fact for us, that is the growing international community, and we are quite proud to be part of that. So that's enough for the introduction, so we can go on with the workflows as the next part of the presentation. So I want to give you a brief and high-level overview over some of the workflows. I have to mention that the list is not complete, that I already said, but I think these workflows contain the most important facts that belong to the machine-based indexing in our library. So I've got some pictures about the workflows, and I will start with the so known productive workflow of our Erschließungsmaschine IMA. And this workflow runs in our library every day in the morning, and it runs unattended and fully automatically as a service. Nearly everything there is encapsulated in separate services that form a reusable and flexible service-oriented architecture for our purposes. So in the first steps, we have to collect important data for ANEF. The first is we need a mass of plain text as basis for our suggestions. And this is a combination of titles out of our catalog management system that comes from OCLC, and a table of contents and full text that we get out of PDFs and EPUB files. The second one I forgot in the introduction is that ANEF works multilingual, and for that we need the information about the language, and we don't have the language information about the texts in our catalog metadata in a lot of use cases. But this information is essential necessary to choose the right model for our suggestions, because the models are mostly language dependent. So for that we implemented a special service that is able to combine different algorithms like Apache Tika to determine the correct language. And now we come to ANEF, to the ANEF suggestions, and that we encapsulate in special indexing and classification service. Why we do that? So in future, we will be very flexible to connect further systems or to connect research environments, test environments, or something else for suggest index terms. And finally, we have to provide the data back to our cataloging system, and this is the task of the Pika cataloging service, the green box on the right side. Yes, in the third box you find a big red arrow, not error. Yes, because one important question is how to assemble the data for our ANEF suggestions. We need them as prerequisites to start ANEF containers in our productive environment. And to get this information, we have introduced two more, and for us, very, very important workflows. The first of them we call the data management workflow of text corpora. It organizes the needed data for ANEF or in future for any perspective suggestion tool. Its development is still in progress, as you can imagine. We have to handle more than 1 million of full texts, more than 1.3 million table of contents, and more than 30 million titles. And the usage, versioning, and the workflow of this data have to be organized. Workflow pipelines have to be reproducible. For that, to share and to synchronize the pipelines and data in a team, we introduced a tool. The tool is the data version control, or shortened DVC. I think, as you can imagine, manual work quickly reaches its limits here. One layer below, we've got 4 steps. The first is to get the relevant gold standard out of our catalog dump. the data are in the Pika format. And Pika is not the best format to do data analysis. So we wrote and introduced the DNB Pika tool that is better known as Pika Rust. You can find it in our GitHub account. Then we have to split the data into train, validation, test corpora, like it's recommended in data science. So in the third box, we fetch the texts out of the PDF and EPUB files, and last but not least, we put all the data together and form the text corpora. So we have the text, and now we need the vocabulary. So we use DVC2, and matching the previous slide, we have 3 stages only here, and the first stage is quite the same as mentioned on the last slide. We use the Pika tool again because our GND data are also part of the library system dump. Oh yes, so we don't have to introduce something else. But after that, in stage 2, it's necessary to filter and manipulate the data. Currently, we realize only simple filters like to ignore some short synonyms with 4 or less characters. But in future, it will be possible to form a very optimized GND vocabulary for our services concerning machine-based subject cataloging. And it will be necessary to have this data in different formats. At the moment, we use the SCOS format, and there we have to export the data. And this is the third stage. So one workflow left. Last but not least, I like to mention the GND evaluation workflow by our subject cataloging librarians or specialists. Beside the well-known measurements like the F-score, it is a very important reassurance for us that they do it for us. Therefore, we use our cataloging tool that comes from OCLC, a very old WinnieBW version. But there our subject cataloging librarians annotate the information about the usefulness of the machine-based subject cataloging. And of course, they have the possibility to add intellectual subject cataloging terms as fresh golden standard. In the next step, we extract the data with our already known Pika tool to make analysis with the extracted data. Yeah, the evaluation workflow is very important for us because when we zoom out a little bit, we can find a circle between the intellectual and machine-based subject cataloging. We need a gold standard from our models, for our models, to form our models, besides some lexical approaches. And we need the feedback for our machine-based suggestions as well. As you can see, there are dependencies between them all. Looking to the scientific literature, we speak about a human and a loop with the main question, what are the right ways for humans and machine learning algorithms to interact to solve problems? I can advise to have a look at Anna Kasprzyc's slide from the Bibliothek 2022, so you can find further information or under Google Scholar or anywhere else in your library. But for the moment, I try to conclude with only one sentence. I think it's almost impossible to do automated suggestions without intellectual subject cataloging. And I think it's something to think about. But not for the moment, because I want to speak about resources. And I want to start with some selected hardware resources. First of all, we try to put everything into our VMware ecosystem. that gives us the flexibility to maintain and adjust our server infrastructure with comparably little effort. And I think it's quite a standard in libraries or universities. But perhaps it can be necessary to leave this convenient Portus into the bare metal direction, and that we do in our AI project. For INF in production is everything fine. We provide 3 identical stages, one for testing, one as the approval stage, and one stage is the productive stage. And you need some hardware, you need some cores, for each model 1 core and enough memory to load all the models we have in use. As you can see, there's quite a lot of power we need there, but the most of power we need is to realize the data management workflow, especially to train the models. The given bullet points only represent the current stage, and I think next year we have to improve the amount of cores and the size of RAM noticeable for training models and for optimize the models as well. Yes, and I also like to mention that we have some more hardware requirements, like the work with the mass of text data, but they don't form another dimension for our infrastructure. So, sorry, we have hardware skills and we've got professional skills. Some of them are necessary, and in my opinion, some of them are good to have. So the next bullet points are to be understood as suggestions out of our experiences rather than fixed points or last. That's not my purpose. At first, we require librarians and data scientists for a lot of specialized input to develop and retrain AI models, and for quality assurance. Both have the professional knowledge and deep insight in use cases and requirements. And as you could see, INF is only a part of a bigger ecosystem and a part of the productive service. Therefore, the next 2 skills are more technically an architecture for the whole system and software developers as well. And below, the hardware infrastructure is interesting because it becomes more and more specialized. They're often not comparable with hardware for other library systems. We've got the biggest machines in our house, or components of the outlined workflows. So we need system administrators and hardware architects. And the list is not complete. It depends on what you want to do with machine-based tools in your directory. Why I speak about it? Because I want to conclude one more time. I want to conclude to the professional skills and the hardware. The usage of machine-based solutions is often more than the side job, unless you want to do more than just a few tests. It combines different professional skills and needs special hardware. And it needs and ties much of long-term manpower. The reason is that we are increasingly dealing with services and not with ideas, with tests and projects only. We have services. And finally, and as a basic conclusion, the usage of machine-based suggestions have to be an integrated part of the library strategies and staffing. I hope I've got 1 minute left, so I want to fly over the DNB AI project. Obviously, we want to get a deeper insight into index-based subject cataloging, and so we formed the DNB AI project with the very special name subject cataloging at the German National Library using IA methods. And this is part of the AI strategy of the federal government of Germany and started in October 2021. I try to be a little bit faster. We've got some purposes, and the main purpose of our project is to improve the quality of the automatic subject cataloging, and this is to be achieved by exploring and testing a wide range of methods and algorithms. Further purposes of the project refer to the vocabulary. In our context, it's a GND only. The vocabulary should better processed and as well as represented. So, and we regarding to the zero-shot concepts of the GND suggestions, we want to increase the number of different GND descriptors. So the last slide, I've got only some seconds left. Independently, also concepts that do not, or at least do not yet exist in the currently given vocabulary are supposed to be discovered. It's a quite interesting goal. And we want to provide tools for practical use. The first tool we provide is the Pika tool. And finally, and this is the last bullet point, we want to bundle IA competencies in the context of cultural institutions in Germany. We want to advance the exchange of information experiences in automated subject cataloging. Now I'm come to the end. Thank you very much for your attention, and please ask me questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Christoph. We do have a few questions for you.
I'm happy.
Yeah, it's good. Nice to have questions always. So what workflow management system do you use to connect these services?
Yeah, this is a good question because we've got a lot of professions. In my department, we are 5 people. Then we've got 1 to 3 people that write the IT software. And last but not least, I think nearly half of people works with our hardware infrastructure because it becomes big and bigger. And then we've got 4 more people in our AI project. I left it out on the last slides. And in my opinion, that's not enough. We need much more because it's a big challenge to do it here.
So it relates with another question, which can you say how many people and full-time equivalents are at DNB involved in machine learned based subject cataloging?
I think that's the same question again, or isn't it?
So the first one was about the which workflow management system you are using.
Okay. The question I answered first was about the people that I read on the board. The next one, workflow management, we use to connect these services in the productive service, I think, is the question. This is hard-coded Java programming at the moment, but we think about Camunda and other tools. But first, it's more important to get this machine working, and then we think about the engine. We have got so many things where we have construction zones, and sometimes it's better to make a smart, small solution to get productive.
Thank you, Christoph. Another question. It can happen that some results for some classes are much better for example, because there are a larger number of publications about the topic. Have you found whenever some keywords or subclasses of some disciplines are much better classified than others?
Yes, of course. I try to pick out examples of the subject classification because the quality of that what we do depend of the mass of training material we've got subject classes where we don't have enough training materials, so the results are not so good. And when we look to the DDC short notation numbers as a second example, we have some the DDC short numbers are derived from the DDC classes we use, and for some of the classes we don't have DDC short numbers because we don't have enough training material to give serious suggestions to. So there is a rule: the more data you have to train, the better is it for your suggestions.
Thank you very much, Christoph. We still have more questions, but I'm afraid we are out of time. So thank you very much.
Yes, very pleasure for me.
Have a look at the chat in the town hall. I think you'll find more questions there for you. There's clearly lots of interest for your work.
Okay, thank you very much. Have a nice evening.